Russ Heltman here with all Bearcats, filling in for Alex Frank on this end of week Locked On Bearcats episode. We're diving into a full-on preview of the Tulsa game for UC football on Saturday, along with my MVPs in all three phases from the non-conference slate for UC football. Then we'll close the episode in style with a look at the media appearances for Wes Miller, Coach Chad Dollar, John Newman III, and brand new Bearcats basketball star Landers Nolly II. All that coming up on Locked On Bearcats.
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, I'm Russ Heltman, filling in for Alex Frank on today's episode. Thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first choice every single day. We are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code LOCKEDON and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Be talking about Underdog Fantasy at the end of this first segment, previewing the Tulsa versus University of Cincinnati Bearcats road battle for UC on Saturday night. Should be a really, really interesting affair. Vegas has this one pegged at a 9.5 point spread in favor of the Bearcats. Looking at the ESPN matchup predictor, roughly 75.8% of the time, the computers are expecting UC to get the job done here. And I have them winning as well. I think it's going to be something like a 45 to 35 type win for the Bearcats, 45-27. I think they handle the Tulsa Golden Hurricane pretty well, and we'll dive into that right now. And a Bearcats team ranked 14th in Bill Connolly's S&P Plus rankings, going up against the 74th ranked team in Tulsa, just less than 10 spots better than the Indiana Hoosiers team that got beat by 3 touchdowns this past weekend. Obviously, Tulsa played this Bearcats team very tough over the last 3 appearances in which the Bearcats have come out on top. They haven't been easy games, though, especially last year, 28-20 win for Cincinnati in what was the college game day kind of exclamation point on that entire really fun weekend. That was actually the first weekend we started the All Bearcats site, and I got my coverage sea legs underneath me then. 28-20, they had to make, the Bearcats defense did 8 stops inside their own 12-yard line to make sure that the Tulsa Golden Hurricane and Davis Brin did not have a chance to get the job done and score a touchdown and tie that thing up at 28 in the final moments. One of the many key plays, key stretches over the greatest season in the history of this UC football program. To me, this is where it all starts once again for the Bearcats. They come into this game searching for another championship. That's all that matters to this team. It's about putting winning football on the field that leads to championship opportunities. And really the one championship opportunity they're going to get this year outside of the bowl championship, whether that be a Cotton Bowl appearance or something like that, it's going to come in the AAC championship game at the end of November, first weekend of December. And the path to get there starts with a victory over the Golden Hurricane, who are one of the best passing offenses in the entire country. This is the entire game for me, is whether or not we are going to see Davis Brin or Braylon Braxton, the freshman quarterback for the Tulsa Golden Hurricane, who had to come in last week in their hard-fought battle, 35-27, I believe the final score was. Tulsa going down to then ranked number 16, Ole Miss. And Braxton comes in at halftime, 9 of 21 passing for 83 yards with a touchdown and an interception, added 4 carries for 39 yards. Sorry about my light going out in the middle of the recording. We'll have to get a new one right here. That is never good in the middle of the podcast, but we press on here. Braxton, as I mentioned, 9 of 21 in that game, 83 yards, threw a touchdown and an interception. Seemed like Ole Miss really was able to corral him and make sure he didn't beat them with his legs, although did add 44 carries for 39 yards, had one big 17-yard game, but they bottled him up besides that. And to me, Braylon Braxton is the X factor in this game. Who knows what you're getting out of him? Who knows if we're even going to see him? We had head coach of Tulsa, Philip Montgomery, noting after the game that Davis Brin possibly could have come back in with that, I believe it was an ankle sprain, but they just chose to be on the safe side. They knew he couldn't perform exactly to the level of excellence that he was searching for and has played at throughout this season. Looking at Bren's numbers, he is the Pied Piper for one of the best passing attacks in the entire country. Fourth in the FBS in passing yards, eighth in adjusted yards per attempt, tied for eighth with 12 passing touchdowns, completing 63% of his throws right now is Davis Brin, and a lot of that production going to his top target, another vaunted veteran. Brin, been in this rivalry for 4 years now, 5 years. He's a head-up senior, as is graduate Keelan Stokes, who's had 507 receiving yards this year, 5'10", 202-pound bowling ball that can really make people miss in the open field. He can truck stick you a little bit too as well, averaging 126.8 yards per game, fourth in the FBS this season. He is a problem out there on the perimeter and in the slot. They like to move him around all over the place. This is a guy that is really the biggest offensive weapon for a team in Tulsa who does not run the ball very well. Their top running option, Steven Anderson, this year, averaging 4 yards per carry. That's 0.1 less than the bottom 35 ranked total rushing attack from the UC team this year. So they rank 57th in rushing EPA per play. The Tulsa Golden Hurricane do. Anderson, as I mentioned, 206 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's what you want to try to do in this game if you're the Cincinnati Bearcats, looking at the defense of UC going up against the Tulsa offense. Try to make them run the football. Pull out. We all have heard those cover 2 coverages. We've all come to know and love those, especially if you followed the NFL over the past couple of years. Put a dome on that passing attack. Try to keep Keelan Stokes and Santana ahead of you, in front of you. Don't let them get behind and get those big plays off. And make Braylon Braxton have to come up with nice, sound decisions if that's who ends up playing against zone coverage, against tough-looking coverage packages from Mike Tressel and the Cincinnati defense. You got 66 pass attempts last week out of the Indiana Hoosiers. Jaquan Shepard talked to me this week about how impactful that was for this team's development, about how impactful the entire non-conference slate in general was for this secondary and their ability to face some of these high-flying passing attacks they're going to go up against in the AAC. And, of course, they get arguably the highest-flying one to start the conference season. 10th in passing EPA per play, diving into the analytics of Tulsa. 15th in overall EPA per play on offense. So the fact that this is the biggest test, I would say, so far for this Cincinnati defense. Arkansas, of course, had more talent on paper offensively than the Tulsa Golden Hurricane, but they did it in more of a smack you in the mouth, methodical, lean on the rushing attacks type style. And this is going to be completely flipped for the Bearcats, who may not have the services of Arquan Bush. I was at practice on Tuesday. He was kind of off to the side, getting his own work in there, and did not, from my vantage point, see him go into practice. And we don't have a read on whether or not he's practiced at all this week. So that's a big status up in the air. And the guy who is probably the X factor on the other side of the ball for Cincinnati, this to me is coming because I believe I'm focusing on the offense of Tulsa versus the Cincinnati defense, because I think Cincinnati's offense should be able to move the football. They should be able to get the job done here against this Tulsa defense. We'll dive into that in just a moment. But real quick on tying up the bow from this Bearcats defense facing the Tulsa offense, Arquan Bush's replacement last week, Justin Harris, got targeted heavily in the second half when he ended up coming in and taking over that final 30 minutes for Bush. 14 targets from Connor Bazelak. He only allowed 4 catches, though. 38 yards, had 2 pass breakups on the day, but had those 3 pass interference calls. I don't think I've ever seen a game where one player in particular gets 3 pass interference calls in one half, for that matter. So obviously the pulling, the tugging, the leverage points here and there in coverage are something to clean up for Harris. But overall, I think he can perform pretty well as a senior and a guy that's been in this program a long time, has had decent production, has had decent experience on the field. And another guy, a freshman, JQ Hardaway, can mix in there as well. He's obviously got the physical talent to get out there and try to put a clamp on this passing attack from Tulsa. A defense in Tulsa that plays right into the hands of this Bearcats passing attack. 120th nationally, as I mentioned on yesterday's show, an EPA per pass play allowed this season, .334 expected points added per pass play given up by this defense. That's 120th in the nation. Raw stats, though, they're pretty good because they have a 54-17, I believe the victory was in week 2 on their docket against Jacksonville State, where they held that team to less than 100 yards passing. 56.9% total completion percentage allowed. That's 36th in the country. And they have total allowed just 189 yards passing per game. That's also in the top 35 or in the top 36 nationally at number 31. So to me, sure, the raw stats say that this is a decent passing coverage unit. But when you look throw by throw and against FBS teams in particular, those 3 games so far for the Tulsa Golden Hurricane pass defense have not gone particularly well. And going up against Ben Bryant and Tyler Scott, 2 guys that I'm going to talk about in the next segment pretty heavily, along with Trey Tucker, Josh Wiley, Leonard Taylor, Nick Mardner, there's just a bounty of weapons that can get used in this game. I would expect maybe some more utilization of the tight ends. I'd love to see Josh Wiley get rewarded a little bit more for his amazing blocking on run plays that have worked out so far this year. And on a few touchdown passes where they haven't even sent Wiley out into a route, he's picking up pass rushers on the inside, on the outside, and it's letting Ben Bryant have basically 7-on-7 status back there to have all day to throw the football. So to me, this is a very, I think, intriguing opening road date in the American Athletic Conference for this Bearcats team. On the UC, according to GoBearcats.com, they can tie the all-time series at 17-17-2 with a victory here. And it's a place that Luke Fickell has never traveled to. Yes, the Bearcats have never faced the Tulsa Golden Hurricane on the road in the Luke Fickell era. Their 2020 scheduled date was canceled due to COVID-19 cases in the Bearcats program. So should be a really fun game. I'm going to stick with final projection of 45-30, a victory for the UC Bearcats. They keep the train rolling and continue to look like the clear favorite in the AAC. S&P Plus conference projections from Bill Connolly after this past weekend's games have UC as the only favorite in any conference nationally with over a 50% chance to win their conference. It should be a really, really interesting rest of the season. And the 2 games I'm looking at are those road dates against SMU and against UCF and the back half of October. Should be very, very cool to see. We'll have the MVPs on all 3 phases of the football from the non-conference slate after I tell you all about Underdog Fantasy. This episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up college football season. Go to underdogfantasy.com and make sure to set up an account so that you can play Pick'em this weekend on the Bearcats game against Tulsa. All you have to do is look at the players on the Pick'em slate, project whether or not they will go over or under their yardage total or their passing yardage, rushing yardage, all that good stuff. It's available in 30 states, 2 to 5 players across any team, and just decide if they will finish higher or lower. So sign up with promo code Locked On, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Deposit $100, you get $100 free. Just make sure to go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store. Once again, the promo code Locked On, deposit $100 and get $100 free. MVPs. It's time to name them here on Locked On Bearcats. I'm your host, filling in for Alex Frank this week, Russ Heltman. All 3 phases of the game. Let's see if the listening audience can make some quick predictions about who I'm going to choose here, and then we will see if you're right. Starting on the offensive side of the ball. Now, usually people would tend to go with the quarterback. They win the MVP award. It feels like every single season in the NFL. I think it's gone to a quarterback in the NFL every year except for 2012 when Adrian Peterson won it. But no, I'm not going with a quarterback as MVP over the first 4 games of this season heading into conference play. My top guy is Tyler Scott, the junior wide receiver who I joked on yesterday's show. Luke Fickell talked about, last year we were thinking about making him a corner if he didn't stop with all those drops. And he had some drops on Saturday, especially in that second half, 2 or 3 that really, really crippled some Bearcats drives. But what a first half he had in red and black. Just unbelievable production. 158 yards in that first half on Saturday with 3 touchdowns on, what was, I think 7 catches it was. And it's highlighted a amazing start. Top 7 receiver in the country start for Tyler Scott, who has ranks tied for 7th with 5 touchdowns on the year. He has been amazing in terms of yards per catch, 16.9 in the top 25 there, 423 total receiving yards, 25 catches. Tyler Scott, to me, is the biggest matchup issue for secondaries in the Mid-American Conference, or not the Mid-American Conference. I think I'm in OU still, in the American Athletic Conference. The reason I say that is because, and I kind of went in depth on it a little bit yesterday, but with how hard he's worked, and he mentioned this on Saturday, how he's banded together with his best friend and I would say best friend, they're good buddies, him and Trey Tucker. They knew each other from the Akron area growing up and going to high school in the same area. And they have committed themselves wholeheartedly to being the best receivers they could possibly be this season for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Staying after practice all summer long, getting the extra work in the weight room with strength coach Brady Collins. And Tyler Scott noted how much of an impact that's had on his game. And when you blend the raw speed, 4.29 40-yard dash is his lowest time he's been clocked at in a Bearcats uniform. The route running ability, the effort, the work ethic. It's such a total package out of Tyler Scott. The demeanor, the guy, I mean, he seems so happy-go-lucky, so carefree. Was asked about being more popular on campus now, and he said, "I haven't really had anybody coming up to me like in the lunch line or at dining halls or walking to class or anything, but it's okay. I'll take that. That's fine. I'd rather have it on social media than have people coming up to me in my face." So he's humble. I mean, he just exudes MVP mentality, MVP essence, and he is my number 1 guy on this offense through the first 4 games. He's been an unbelievable weapon on the outside and in the middle, in the slot, on those post routes, man. One of the best post route runners in the entire country. He is your offensive MVP through the non-conference slate for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Defensive MVP, I mean, who else is it going to be, people? Who else is it going to be besides Ivan Pace Jr., PFF's top-graded off-ball linebacker of all 31 teams in the FBS slate? 23 solo tackles, 46 tackles overall. That leads the American. 23 solo, is tied for 16th nationally. He's tied for 6th with 4.5 sacks, a forced fumble to go in there as well. It's just really difficult to pick anybody else besides the howitzer. That's what I'm going to call him. He's the howitzer. He's the sniper. He's using that sniper celebration after sacks now. Like, I had a strong feeling when they added this guy in the spring, coming out of the transfer portal, doing my deep dive on him, just knowing how productive and how menacing he's been as a linebacker in the Mid-American Conference, that it was going to translate to AAC football. 6 total pressures on Saturday, had 2 sacks on 20 rushes in the game. This is all from PFF. I mean, coverage-wise, he's the total package as well. Allowed -2 yards in coverage on Saturday. He's one of the best coverage linebackers in the country, I would say. 9 tackles overall against the Hoosiers, solo-wise, 15 tackles in general, 32 run defense snaps. He had 9 tackles on those runs. So I just, like, Ivan Pace, I just run out of words to say about him. He's so good. He's humble, just like Tyler Scott is. He exudes a confidence and a kind of, we got this, it's all going to be okay because Ivan's here type of feeling throughout the entire defense. And honestly, every time I watch a Bearcats defensive snap, I look around and there's somehow, some way, Ivan Pace either finishing a tackle, diving for the ball carrier, and coming just short. I mean, he is always around the football. He's a really great, sounds like turning into a really great leader in the locker room. Will Huber touched on that this week and noted how he's starting to get his voice more acclimated and more front focused throughout this season, and was awarded the Bednarik Player of the Week award this past Monday, I believe it was, or on Tuesday, after his performance against Indiana. He is well on his way to being an All-American linebacker for the Cincinnati Bearcats, and I would say he's definitely been the best defensive player in the AAC, and that makes him the defensive MVP for Cincinnati. We might need to get a little weekly poll going. I'll have to tell this to Alex. What comic book or what movie is Ivan Pace going to model his eye black after this week? I got a great pic of him coming out of the tunnel at Paul Brown Stadium with I think it was it the Batman eye black? I think it might have been, or the Spider-Man eye black. But he's been modeling all of his eye blacks differently each week and using some comic book themes. So that's very cool to see from Ivan Pace Jr. And then our special teams MVP from Locked On Bearcats, Russ Heltman, your host today, filling in for Alex Frank. Once again, thanks for making us your first choice every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's going to be my guy, Aussie, Mason Fletcher. 34th in total punts. So you obviously don't love that. You'd love to be 131st in total punts. You never want to punt the ball. But if you are going to punt, you'd love numbers like Mason Fletcher's, who had a career-long 67-yard punt. I believe that happened against Indiana. Was fantastic in that game. Obviously had that disjointed second half for Cincinnati, an afternoon where the rushing attack was the lowest rushing total of Luke Fickell's career as head coach at the Cincinnati Bearcats. And just the second time of his career that they went under 70 yards rushing, dating back to, I believe it was the 2020 game against Army when they were held below that total. Just really, really odd type of outing, rushing the ball, some missed assignments. We went into it on yesterday's show. I won't talk about it much more here, but it led to punts aplenty for Mason Fletcher, who booted the ball, I believe, 8 times on Saturday. That was the first time that a Luke Fickell coach team had punted at least 7 times since the 2020 Peach Bowl against Georgia. So the fact that Mason Fletcher was called to duty so many times, he mixes in a career-long punt and now sits at 18th overall nationally in punting average, 47.4 yards per boot, has the 11th longest punt on the season so far at 67 yards, and is tied for 13th with 8 punts inside the opponent's 20-yard line. He's doing a great job placing the ball. This special teams, I think, once again, despite the change in coordinators, having Kerry Coombs coming in, has been fantastic. And it was one of the best units last year outside of making field goals. And they're 3 for 5 making field goals this year. But Ryan Coey, 23 for 23 on extra points. So that's a huge thing for this Bearcats team. And it will probably loom even larger as we start to play some more games some closer games down the line for the Cincinnati Bearcats. They hope, though, Bearcats fans, I know you hope that Saturday is not very close. Should be a really, really interesting outing. First trip to Oklahoma, Tulsa-wise, for the Bearcats since 2016. We'll be back after a word or two from our sponsors right here on Locked On Bearcats. Russ Heltman filling in for Alex Frank. Starting up the third and final segment on today's show. It's been a fun one. Don't get to ride solo very often on podcasts anymore, but it's good. It's got a lot of stuff to bring you guys today, and I think we've done it well. It's time to switch from basketball over to football. So I'm your host, filling in for Alex Frank on this Friday's Locked On Bearcats podcast, Russ Heltman. Media availability on Thursday as Wes Miller and the Bearcats open up the 2022 season. Just some quick notes to relay from those sessions, and got to see the team practice a little bit afterwards. It was a fun day. It seems like this is going to be a really fun, jovial UC Bearcats team. I don't think necessarily the talent level is at the point where Wes Miller is going to be completely satisfied and like, yeah, we can go in and win a national championship, or next season we can go and win the Big 12, which will be the best basketball conference next season in the history of the sport. You can mark that down. We will never see a better 2-year stretch, honestly, with Oklahoma and Texas still in there, of basketball from one conference. So it's going to be that hard. And that's why obviously Isaiah Collier, Flory Bidunga, all of these 5-star, high 4-star prospects are getting pursued so heavily by Wes Miller and his new associate head coach, Chad Dollar, who also spoke to the media. But I like the chemistry from this team. I think they're gonna have a great shot of getting back to the NCAA tournament for what I believe would be the first time since 2019. I think they should be able to weather the injuries and that just weird stretch at the end of January, first part of February, where they couldn't seem to win a game. They really hit the wall conditioning wise. And that was the biggest theme for me from this media availability, was the conditioning and the emphasis and the importance on this summer program that the Bearcats coaching staff and the Monster Factory guru himself, Michael Reffelt, have put together for guys like Jeremiah Davenport, guys like John Newman, who Wes and John noted he had never really had a true, like, grinding down, building muscle. We're in the gym, working hard, in the weight room, working hard every day type of offseason. And that's what all these guys got. Jeremiah Davenport looking slimmer, looking a little bit more, I think, capable athletically to defend wings in the American Athletic Conference. Obviously, that was an issue for him last year, not outside of his great scoring that he gave the Bearcats. And it should be a more dynamic team, I think. David DeJulius was the one-man offense, the one-man band for most of last season. Now he's got more options in Rob Fennessy to be a playmaker, Landers Nolly to be a playmaker. I think John Newman, the third, could have a massive season this year, given that he hasn't really ever had an offseason to get better. So I loved what I heard from the players. Don't be surprised to hear about Landers Nolly, Wes Miller's nickname for Landers Nolly, which is Ches, because Landers' middle name is Sanchez. So that was an interesting little nugget to hear about. Obviously, they're going to the Maui Invitational, so they're going to get a lot of great experience there. Landers Nolly himself has played in the Maui Invitational, having spent time at Virginia Tech and Memphis in his career, and he told me, I don't really care about going. I'm just there to win it. I've already done my 94 feet, all that kind of stuff. I've already talked. I don't want to talk to Jay Billis this year. Not that he didn't say that, but the basically overarching theme was, we're going there on a business trip. This is not going to be a Hawaiian vacation for the Bearcats basketball team, and that's great to hear. And it's great to see what I saw, I think, just chemistry-wise at practice. These guys were having fun, joking with each other. It seems like Landers Nolly, Kalu Ezikpe, Rob Fennessy, all those guys, all the transfers have acclimated pretty well. It seems like they're joking around nicely. And the last thing I'll say about this, and one thing that I made sure to ask Wes Miller about, was this is his first real recruiting class, first real freshman class that he's able to bring in here. And he's loving what he's seeing. Sage Tolentino, Josh Reed, Daniel Skillings noted that all those guys, of course, are still getting up to speed. They're not necessarily ready for major roles in college basketball, but he likes what he sees. He said he's very impressed and noted, I hope these guys don't watch this press conference because I don't want it to go to their heads at all. But yeah, it was evident on the practice court too that those guys kind of look like one of the players blending in with the rest of the team. And I'm very excited to see what kind of ceiling Wes Miller can squeeze out of this roster in 2022-23 before you start having kind of less margin for error if these recruiting pursuits go the way a lot of Bearcats fans hope they will go. Isaiah Collier still analytically projected on 3, whatever site you look at, to go to the Bearcats as of now. But I don't know what the analytics there are based on, because Isaiah Collier has definitively not really given anybody any insight into his recruitment and what his choice will be. So that's there in the ether. And then, of course, Rayvon Griffith already signed, and we're waiting to see another addition to the 2023 class. We could be talking about that, Alex Frank and I, plenty over the next 2 months, with recruiting and signing season on the horizon for the 2023 high school seniors that are ready to make their college decisions. Russ Heltman in for Alex Frank on today's Locked On Bearcats podcast. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, everyone, for making Locked On Bearcats your first choice every single day. And pop over to our Big 12 podcast to get yourself ready and primed for all things in that conference next year. Get more on the Big 12 by making Locked On Big 12 your second listen every day, as host Josh Neighbors and the local experts of Locked On take you across the Big 12 in 30 minutes. Locked On Big 12, your second listen each and every day. Locked On Big 12. Russ Heltman signing off on this episode as we await the next jaunt through Locked On Bearcats territory from Alex Frank. He'll have you covered with a recap of Saturday's night game affair in Tulsa, Oklahoma against the Golden Hurricane. Big question mark around Davis Brin and that quarterback situation, and we'll be all over it on Locked On Bearcats, and of course on allbearcats.com. You can find the final huddle and more from Saturday's action when the results are finalized. Russ Heltman signing off. Thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first choice every single day.